dog.
I expect to win every time I step out there on the floor.
I don't even know where you're sitting at.
I can't accept the loss, I'm hard-headed. There's a little bit of madness to my method. Many falling off that fine line that I'm treading. I risk anything to be great, and I'm not letting nobody rob me of my victory. Number one, that's what I'm meant to be. When by any means, only thing that makes sense to me, I can make nice or make history. I got that dog in me, yeah. Turn me up. Big energy, got the crowd going nuts. I got that dog in me, yeah. I take on anyone. I don't need a one-on-one. I got that dog in me, yeah.
All right, we are on the clock, and we're going to go fast through this one. A lot of people have been asking for quicker lives, maybe not these 1 hour long ones. You want something in the morning, you're going to get it right now. So we're going to go through 10 things that we learned yesterday. And we're going to go the quick update on the Ulrich Chomche situation, and also to those of you who missed it, a little cool thing about Scottie Barnes. So let's get to it. To those of you who are new around here, please hit subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. If you're looking for Raptors content throughout the summer and Team Canada content, post-game analysis throughout the series, throughout the summer, you're obviously looking for preseason, regular season, all that stuff. We got you covered on this channel, post-game, every single game, and we're gonna be doing a lot of analysis this summer because I'm very excited about the Toronto Raptors. And little cool thing here. So Scottie Barnes.
Have I ever had a pencil basketball? Of course, man. They stay posting about me, showing love. I love that. They're always showing love. I mess with that.
So that was really cool. And it reminded me why we do this. And it was to support the players. And we're always going to have players back. So if y'all remember, a couple of days ago, I started going on and on about Ulrich Chomche. And Ulrich Chomche is a professional basketball player for your Toronto Raptors who has less than 10,000 followers on Instagram. This did not make sense to me. I cannot understand how this fan base has fallen off so far that a guy can get drafted to our team, be this exciting, prospect, 18 years old, youngest player in the draft. And the only thing I'm seeing under the post announcing his, signing with the Raptors is free Sasha Vezenkov. And I'm just like, ugh, this is disgusting. So I'm going to show you what this community did under his post. It's really touching. And then we are going to get into 10 key takeaways from what we learned yesterday. I don't expect a lot of people to go through the live. We had a 2-hour live that got sliced down a lot because of copyright and all that stuff. And it was probably very choppy. So I expect, maybe people don't have the patience to go through 2 hours and sift through the choppiness of it. So I'm going to sum it up into 10 things that we took as key takeaways from yesterday. Things that we learned about Bruce Brown, where he stacks up, Sasha Vezenkov, and a key update on the cap sheet. I'm going to show you the cap sheet, what it looks like, what the implications are in terms of what the Raptors can and can't do. And we're going to do our best to be out of here within less than 20 minutes. Okay, let's get to it. So first, a little tribute to y'all. Thank you so much for doing this. Look at the comments. It was relentless positivity. This is an 18-year-old who is very far away from home, who has worked very, very hard to make it to the NBA, the first player out of the NBA Africa Academy. It's a big deal, okay? It is a really big deal, and whether you understand it or not, being 18 years old is not easy. Being a professional athlete is not easy. And, coming to a new country, coming to a new culture, coming to a new team, when language is a barrier, and seeing all these random Greek fans saying, free Sasha Vezenkov, I felt so bad. And then, some Raptor fans went and be like, oh, he's 2 years away from me, 2 years away. He's a bust. So what y'all did was you got 292 comments, maybe 40, 50 are stupid comments. And then you got 250 just saying, welcome to Toronto, welcome to Canada. And some of y'all even wrote some nice messages for Ulrich Chomche. So shout out to you and thank you for keeping it nice, keeping it nice for our rook. I'm sure that he would appreciate it. And one day, my grandmother used to tell me you don't get two chances to make a first impression. This is a really good first impression, not only for us as a fan base, not only for him, obviously to us, but also I think just for anyone looking around, at this very unknown, very unheralded prospect that, hey, you get 57th pick and you got fans flooding your timeline with love. That's pretty cool. All right, 5 key takeaways. This is 5. It's going to be 10. I apologize. I'm a little bit tired, but okay. And then afterwards, it gets to your comments. So, number 1, the Immanuel Quickley contract. Very interesting. So we got an update on the Immanuel Quickley contract that it is flat. This is very important, and I reacted live to it. That this was a really huge update. We hadn't heard anything about this before from Bobby Marks or Woj or Shams or whatever, but this is a big deal. I will tell you why it's a big deal. Number 1, it really does impact what you can do this summer, right? And I think part of the reason they did it this way is because they don't really have plans to use their mid-level or full mid-level. And if you're going to go 35 million right now, it's a great thing because this contract kicks in starting this year. So 24-25, which is technically the season we are in right now, going through to the end of this season. So he's on 35. So his first year at 35 is going to be a very big overpay. Let's just put it that way, right? It's going to be a really big overpay for the type of player we saw last year. If he doesn't make some monumental jump, he's going to immediately jump into, top 12, top 13 type paid guards. Initially, we'd expected this to be a standard contract with 8% raises and that it would eventually balloon up to close to $40 million in year 5. Now we see that it is flat. This is great because this contract is going to have a lot of positive value on the back end and it's going to have a lot of negative value on the front end. The negative value on the front end doesn't hurt you because you don't have a bloated salary sheet right now. It's going to help you later on because when Scottie's contract starts to jump, because you're not going to be able to do this with Scottie's contract because he's a max player, his contract is going to have standard raises. And Immanuel Quickley, if his contract stays flat, RJ Barrett's contract goes up, Grady Dick's contract goes up. So you could be a pretty expensive roster 3-4 years from now, especially if Grady pops for you and you have to sign him. Shooting is a premium. You might have to sign Grady Dick. If he really works out for you, you might have to sign Grady to, I want to say like $25 million, $28 million. And if that ends up being the case, you're going to be very, very happy to have that extra little savings on Immanuel Quickley's contract. Now, what does this mean for Gary Trent? It means Gary Trent is unfortunately shit out of luck because the Raptors, even if they wanted to, probably couldn't extend him much of an offer. So Gary Trent wanted what? So we got some news, and I was shocked out of my mind. So Gary Trent, to those of you who remember, his representation Clutch got him a very cushy deal on the last contract, and that was, I believe, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 years, 51 million, and that broke down to about, was it 54 million? It broke down to about 18 million last year. And that was a player option on the 3rd year. So it was a really, really stupid deal when the Raptors signed it. I thought the Raptors gave up both term and contract value, which you usually don't see that happen. It was the ultimate bet on yourself type of deal for Gary Trent Jr. I'm sure if he had really wanted to at that time, the Raptors would have given him 4 years guaranteed at a lower number. But he decided to go for the 3 years. He decided to go with the maximum leverage for himself and the maximum flexibility for himself, giving himself the player option as well. He cashed in on the player option last year after having not so great a year, and then he had an even worse year this year. So unfortunately, right now, you would think to yourself, hey, it was an upside play on a 22, 23-year-old coming off a pretty hot shooting season in Tampa. The Raptors overpaid. He's probably going to have some people talk to him and get him, settle down to earth and realize he doesn't have that great a market. And he's probably going to settle for something close to 12, 13. I was hearing some really wild numbers earlier in the year, and I talked to someone who has typically been very correct about Gary Trent Jr. stuff because they're pretty close to him. And I started hearing numbers like 20 plus, and I was just shocked. And I thought Malik Monk, when he took that $17-18 million deal, it pretty much just cratered any hopes of a Gary Trent Jr. market because Malik is clearly the better player. It was a comparable player. And then when KCP goes for 20, I think it was 65 or 66 million for 3 years, that pretty much kiboshed any chance that Gary Trent Jr. was going to have at, it's a game of musical chairs, right? Gary Trent Jr. allegedly, now we get the report, he wanted $25 million a year. I think that's frankly insane. No disrespect to Gary Trent Jr., obviously very big supporter of Gary the person, but Gary the player is not worth $25 million in the modern NBA, not in the previous NBA, especially not under the new CBA. Regardless of where TV contracts go, there is not a future in which Gary Trent Jr., the player that we see today, is worth that money. I hear some people saying he'd be lucky to get the mid level. I honestly think he should get the mid level from somebody. It will not be the Raptors. Okay. Unless something really drastic happens for the Raptors, it's not going to be them. Okay. Update number 3 is that Grady is starting for now. Okay. Now I'm pretty much confirmed on the record at this point that I would prefer, that Grady not start. I really wouldn't mind him coming off the bench. I like the idea of him being sort of secondary playmaker, that backup guard spot, especially if it's taken by Davion Mitchell. I'm not really seeing a lot of playmaking on that unit. So unless you're going to run everything through Kelly Olynyk, I really like the idea of Kelly and Grady having some run, and maybe that starting lineup having more of a chance with more of a defensive player, especially if the Raptors were to make a trade Bruce Brown for Cam Johnson. But hell, even Bruce Brown is probably a better fit for that starting lineup. Uh, but Bobby Webster let it leak that, hey, it's going to be Grady. And then he mentioned, and then whoever comes off the bench. So he kind of put Grady apart from that. Now, it's funny because last year we learned about the Raptors starting lineup from Dennis Schroeder. This year, at least for now, the projected starting lineup seems to include Grady Dick. Now, things can change. Obviously, I am a big believer that players, especially of Grady's current level, should be earning these spots. And I really wouldn't mind if that spot was open and he had to fight for it. But I understand the Raptors thinking. He is really one of the higher upside, if not the second highest upside player on your roster, apart from Scottie Barnes. And even if you don't consider him the second, you pretty much at minimum have to put him third in terms of prioritization for the future. So I do think that it is important that he get minutes. I don't necessarily think it's important that he starts, but allegedly the Raptors do. There was a lot of um, talk about, especially if you read between the tea leaves and read between the lines, on Scottie wanting to play point. His Instagram bio still says point guard, 6'9", West Palm Beach, PG. And so Immanuel Quickley, a couple of times Scottie shouted out and he said, "That's my PG, that's my point guard, that's my point guard." But it's been really interesting that the language that these guys have used has always been like they're not saying specifically co-point, but they always make a point to say, "I play off of him. We can both play with the ball." So I think that this is just two guys really understanding what they want, and they both spoke about it a lot. That they each talked about the types of players they want to be and how they can play off of each other. These conversations need to happen. You cannot be the coach dictating to players how they're going to play with each other. At some point, players have to figure it out. Seems like these two have really figured it out. And I, for one, think that this is probably for the best, right? Obviously, don't want Scottie completely off the ball. I think he has a lot of good playmaking chops and whatever, but maybe running, him exclusively at point maybe wasn't going to be the long-term answer, even though he is more of a point guard. Until his handle gets drastically better in his dribble manipulation and maybe even some of his deep shooting, I think the team will be better splitting duties between these two. And it also makes the offense a lot less predictable. So I like it. Moving on to number 5, Bruce Poker. So the Raptors seem, I think, to my understanding, they may have overestimated Bruce Brown's market. That's just my read on it. It feels like last trade deadline, when they acquired him prior to the trade deadline, they thought that there would be a real market for him. And I'm not really sure if that market ever picked up, but I do know that he's overpaid massively. And some of that optionality that they got rid of this offseason by picking up that option, that no longer is part of, the reason his contract was so sexy when you picked it up from the Pacers is because you could really go so many different ways with it, right? And then you kept holding on to it, probably because you like the player, or maybe you didn't get the offer you're looking for, thinking, or we'll just kick the can down the road. And it's funny how the Raptors can do the same thing over and over and over again and still never really quite figure out the lesson that other teams don't value the same things you do. You may love Bruce Brown, the cutter, And you may think Bruce Brown's a fantastic player, but other teams don't see him as a $23 million player. So, with there are teams out there like Detroit, et cetera, that can just absorb a bad contract into cap space. I'm not necessarily sure that a team would prefer to take Bruce Brown's contract as opposed to like like a traded player exception. So if the long-term goal was to save a team from cap hell or luxury tax hell or a second apron, et cetera, well then Detroit or one of these teams that's below the cap or maybe has a little bit more room on their salary sheet, they're in a better position to absorb that contract than you are. Of course, however, if a team like the Warriors ends up wanting to get off of Andrew Wiggins, okay, yeah, you can absorb a bad contract, but are you really in a better spot by taking on 3 years of Andrew Wiggins? I'm not really sure. So honestly, my long-term play on this is Bruce Brown is going to be salary fodder at the trade deadline. I doubt that they're going to be thinking about him as a long-term piece. I could be wrong. I remain committed to this idea that when Cameron Johnson, if Cameron Johnson becomes available, that Bruce Brown plus stuff will be offered. And I'm curious to see if maybe the Raptors are just waiting to see what kind of jump Scottie and IQ have actually taken, because that sort of brings me to one of my subsequent points after that. Um, Masai Ujiri talked a lot about investing in people, not just players, right? Talked a lot about Immanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes being the right type of people. And again, I don't think Masai's petty. I don't think he's taking jabs at anybody. Maybe, I'm sure he has a lot of love for OG and Pascal and whatever. So, if you're a detractor of guys like, Pascal and Fred perhaps, or Dennis Schroeder or whoever, you might say it as, okay, well, that's what he's saying. He's saying these guys are what those guys are not. I think he's more or less saying that these guys are a continuation of what those guys are, and the type of people that he's invested in have always been workers, right? We've heard several drafts, Masai Ujiri, oh, we need workers, we need workers. Okay. So obviously observing Scottie and observing Immanuel Quickley for the past half season plus, and that was a big reason why they pulled that trade off. They wanted a very good sample size, and it's unfortunate that Scottie got hurt on an Immanuel Quickley, layup or whatever. I think it was like he kicked his hand or whatever, that they didn't get more of a sample size. I'm sure they would have appreciated it, but I think they saw enough in the time that these two played together to say, okay, not only do they work together, but we really do think they can do some of that DeMar and Kyle stuff, right? Which is they can rally the troops, they mesh off each other really well, and they're both about the right stuff, which is to say that they're both selfless, that they're both about team, they're both about winning. So I really do think that it factored in a lot, not just the type of players they are, which I think can become a very big focus of when we're talking about who's worth what amount of money. But we're not talking to these guys every day. I'm not talking to Manuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes every single day, nor are you. You're not coming in to work with these guys. You're not really seeing what impact they're having on their younger teammates, etc., what type of example they're setting. But this was a really, really, really big thing with the Raptors, and was such a big reason why they were so reluctant to move off guys like Fred and Pascal, is because they felt that those two set such a great example. Speaking of number 7, 1.5 years. Masai Ujiri has talked about this being a tough year and a half, right? He's kept talking about year and a half, year and a half. It's a really tough year and a half. And so he had alluded to this thing in the Toronto Raptors interview on YouTube, which you can definitely go check out on Raptors YouTube, where he said that the first time that he really felt light, or he felt like back to themselves, or, felt happy, was in the second round. Like, when they drafted Mobo and Ulrich Chomche. You can make of that what you will. Masai got his, Masai got his long African, 7-footer, so he's happy. No, that's not it. I think he was talking about the vibe in the room, right? He was talking about, the coaches and the players being there, and just the energy in the room, and just feeling light, and that they had finally gotten through the storm. And I thought that there was a pretty notable omission when Masai Ujiri was talking about the people that took to get here, right? I think he mentioned Coach Casey, he mentioned DeMar, he mentioned Kyle, he mentioned all these people, and there was one name that was missing, and it was Nurse, right? And I don't remember him bringing up Fred by name either. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And we don't really need to talk about these people at this point, but I do believe that it weighed very heavily on Masai Ujiri that those situations ended up the way that they did. And I do believe, ultimately, as much as Masai Ujiri wants to politic around it, which I don't blame him for, I do believe that ultimately it came down to a very simple fact of, you know, money. It came business came above personal. And as a person, Masai Ujiri has always put the person above the business. And I think it was perhaps, a bit of a betrayal for him. Just as DeMar felt betrayed, right? Because he was kind of a casualty of the business. I think Masai Ujiri might have had his own DeMar moment. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze Masai Ujiri any more than I did yesterday, but I do think that when you feel, the disappointment in him, that what he wanted to happen didn't happen, and what he holds responsible for that, who he holds responsible for that. Does he hold a grudge against that? Is he happy it's kind of over? But him talking about a year and a half, it being really tough, I understand it. It was tough for us as well, as a fan base that could kind of be awake to it. But I do think that it really, really pointed to just how sour those relationships became. And I think that it was a little bit of validation that what we've been complaining about for a year and a half with this team, the brand of basketball they were playing, the gunning for contracts, the stat padding, and all that shit that we saw of the 2020, game that Fred VanVleet played, the podcast tour, all of that stuff. Really, in the end of the day, it bothered Masai as much as it bothered us. So I thought that was really interesting to hear him talk about that again. Um, Number 8, show faith, reward faith, right? Kind of piggybacking off of a previous point, about building up people. I think that it was very clear that Masai Ujiri wants to show these guys faith, right? He wants to pay Immanuel Quickley before Immanuel Quickley is worth this, because he's just doing what he's always done, right? And look, a lot of people believed that, a lot of people were reacting, of course, yesterday to podcast Paul George talking about how he almost became a Toronto Raptor, and how the Raptors sort of blocked it, didn't want to get rid of Pascal Siakam. And I think a lot of people were very upset at the time, saying, hey, Paul George was a top 3 MVP candidate. You had a chance to pair these guys with Russell Westbrook and MVP himself, not too far removed from his peak, with Kawhi Leonard, and you would have kept Kawhi Leonard. How could you give all that up for Pascal Siakam? And of course, in hindsight, you may suggest that, the Raptors look really stupid, right? Maybe the OKC Thunder really did feel better about Pascal Siakam than they did about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Maybe that was the deal. But I very much doubt that package didn't include a boatload of draft picks as well. And it's not like Kawhi and PG have been winning championships. And I'm pretty sure to match the salaries to include both those guys, given where Siakam's contract was at the time, I'm pretty sure you would have had to give up at least Kyle Lowry. And I don't think the Raptors were willing to trade Kyle Lowry or Pascal Siakam at the time. And so Masai Ujiri has always shown this ability to have faith in people before they completely show that they're worth that faith. And it's worked. It's worked really brilliantly for him. You can point to the last year of it not working out. Maybe Fred VanVleet is just that rare type of person where it didn't work out. But you know what? It kept working until it didn't, right? Fred VanVleet was a bet on yourself, undrafted guy, became a notoriously cheap second contract, and he was a notoriously cheap third contract as well. So, and when it came time to pay that expensive contract that he would never live up to, the Raptors didn't pay it. So, Masai Ujiri, we give him a lot of flack for the DeMar Carroll, contract for the most part. I think his contracts have been pretty fair. Kem Birch, DeMar Carroll, Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher is also debatable, but yes, it sometimes feels like the Raptors are betting against themselves. But they're showing faith in a player that, frankly, Immanuel Quickley, he got a lot more than he was asking for in New York, right? You can say it's the taxes, you can say it's the Canada tax, you can say it's whatever. You can say, the role that he, has with the Raptors, the numbers he put up with the Raptors warrant this. I'm not sure what you would say. I think we can all agree as a community, we all agreed. I think most of us agreed that this was an overpay, but they believe that he will move into this, right? And you might suggest, and I think a lot of Raptor fans suggested last year, that it was completely premature to hand the reins of the franchise over to Scottie Barnes, to, given the year that he had in year 2, and they showed faith in him, right? Sometimes faith is not rewarded. Sometimes you trust a stranger with your bag and you come back and the bag is gone. But I think Masai Ujiri is choosing to believe that two good people will reward the faith. And so, we'll see. And at this point, it feels like the Raptors are basically telling these two young guys, show us where we're going. We're handing you the keys to the car. Drive, and if you want to drive us off a cliff, we're gonna live with that. If you're gonna drive us to the lottery, we're gonna live with that. But we're gonna support you, right? And I it's something I've been exploring a lot lately, which is the secret to life, right? Trust before you're ready to trust seems to be a pretty good answer to the secret of life. So I think the Raptors are doing that with Immanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes for sure. Number 9, we got a bit of an update on the Sasha Vezenkov situation. The Raptors, as I alluded to before, were aware of the Sasha Vezenkov situation. Currently, he is an asset. He is an expiring contract. Of course, he has a team option, so he has sort of that Bruce Brown contract in a sense, right? He is basically the Bruce Brown contract on a much more miniature scale. So he has the maximum optionality, which is to say that any team could trade for him, use him as salary filler, dump him as an expiring, and then have another go at it next year. Complication is allegedly he wants to go back home, right? So the Raptors are going to deal with it. They're going to talk to him. They're very familiar with his agent. I talked about that before, and I they did their due diligence. They're saying they communicated it well to him. So maybe there's like some gas coming from Olympiacos side or whatever. But Michael Grange reported that he expects him to be in training camp. I heard otherwise. We'll see what happens, but they'll continue to deal with it over the next couple of days, and we'll see, if that situation resolves itself. The Raptors could use the extra roster spot for sure, but honestly, they could also use his shooting and his experience, and I think he would be really good for Grady Dick. If he buys in, he's not a bad player to have around, in my opinion. And finally, number 10, a budding friendship. One could not help but notice that there was a real connection between Scottie and IQ. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel fake. It feels like these are guys who've really, really poured in some time to getting to know each other. And I wondered if that would be the case when Immanuel Quickley got traded here. It didn't seem like it was the case right away, right? It didn't seem like there was a lot of on court communication. Maybe there was a lot of one of my best friends got traded for you, and I'm not your friend right now, but it certainly started to build when Scottie got injured, or a little bit before Scottie got injured. You started to see their communication. And then, when Scottie got injured, you started to see Immanuel Quickley go into him at the bench. And I don't know who brokered that friendship or who sparked it or whatever. I have no idea, but it was very real for the last 20 games of the season, and has obviously continued. And, they are very yin and yang in terms of personality types from what I can gather, right? But I think they balance each other well. They're both very humble. They're both extremely hardworking. They're both similar age, right? They're both remarkably mature. They both take basketball as a very deep passion. And I don't think either one of these guys are about to get complacent because they got paid, because they have a lot of integrity, right? And they both have this very God first, service first attitude towards everything. So they think about their teammates. They're always thinking about paying it back. So I just think that these two guys are going to get along super well. And, we might be seeing the beginnings of, We the North Part 2 with a complete rebrand. Scottie hinted at a rebrand, possibly purple, whatever. He was kind of being coy about it. He obviously knows about the rebrand. So I can't wait to see what the Raptors are going to do. I expect these two to be down with their young teammates in summer league at some point. Obviously, doing play groups. We're going to have Darko Rajakovic. He's going to be working with these guys. Look, man, the Raptors have basically had a very extended training camp since last season, right? They've been trying to get these guys in shape, and we'll see. We'll see what comes out of it. Anyways, my 15-minute target went to almost 30 minutes, but hopefully it's a little bit more condensed. And this was pretty jam-packed and not super laggy. 12 comments here, and thanks a lot for your comments. California Classic, not something. Nice one saying, wonder where Gary Trent Jr. ends up. Yeah, I wonder where he ends up as well. If I was him, I would take a minimum contract and go to Denver. But actually, I wouldn't take a minimum contract, honestly, because once you take a minimum contract, it really does hamper your next contract big time. Anyways, talk to y'all later. Have a great day. Hit subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. And also, big shout outs to Cynthia and John for the etransfers on the last live. Thank you so much.